Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Black Expat Experience, a podcast and live show highlighting the lived experiences of Black expats around the world. I am Kendall Tyson, your host, licensed therapist, and fellow Black expat. We have another amazing episode in store for you today, so I would like everyone to welcome our newest guest, Miss Adrienne Waller, to the show. Hi, Adrienne.
Hello, hello, hello.
I'm so happy that you were able to make it. We did a little bit of interview tag trying to make it happen. So I'm really grateful for being able to listen to and share your story. So everyone, a little bit of background about Adrienne. She's originally from Metro Detroit, Michigan in the United States. She studied at Michigan-Ann Arbor for undergraduate with a concentration in Organizational Studies and Sociology. She received her master's from National Louis University in elementary education with a concentration in special education. Adrienne has been in education for over 15 years and doing parent involvement work, teaching, leadership, serving in public and private and charter schools in the US, Qatar, China, Kuwait, and now the Cayman Islands. Her leadership learning includes earning a Cambridge Leadership Certificate, Michigan School Administrative Certificate, and a Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Certificate. Matched with her leadership qualifications is a teaching certificate in Illinois for elementary education, special education, middle school social studies, and middle school math. There's so much more to learn about her, so I really want us to dive into this conversation. I'm so glad that you're a fellow expat that works in education.
Yes, education is, I ran from it and, couldn't run from forever. So it is so great. I love it.
That's amazing. So can you kind of give us an introduction into your genesis to working abroad? Because, reading your bio, you worked in a variety of places, lived in a variety of cultures. So I'm really curious how you got started on this path.
So interesting with that one is because actually I started my expat journey at the age of 5 when my mom moved us to Germany. So
you're a third culture kid.
A little bit. We weren't there too long, so I feel like I have elements of it. I definitely think it comes through in a lot of what I do. Mm-hmm. Then in undergrad, I did research in South Africa. So I had these 2 different experiences with living abroad, but not a part of my adult life. And so I actually never thought that I really could do this teaching abroad thing. I didn't even know it was a thing.
Yeah.
I was in my 9th year teaching, and if I'm honest, I was burnt out by US education. I kind of was like, you know what? I don't think this is for me. I think I need to exit stage left. Yeah. And then we were at a leadership dinner when I was here, because I'm back home for the next 2 days. Okay. But I was back home and working, and we were at this leadership dinner, and it was a long table. And at one end, they were talking about teachers who work in different countries. And I turned to the person next to me. I was like, they talking about people who work in different countries? She goes, yeah, I did it. And I was like, wait, what? And she started talking to me about it. And I was just like, tell me more.
Right.
A month later, I had a profile up. I was telling everybody, oh, I'm going to live in the Middle East. I hadn't found a job. I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that was happening. And everybody's like, Adrienne, only you would do that. Because there was nobody in my circle who was doing it. And so they're just like, you would be the person who would do that. And I'm like, yep. And then by May, I had signed a contract and I was moving to Qatar. So.
Oh, wow. It goes so quickly. Just to hear your story kind of reminds me of mine, that it went so quickly. And I wonder if what you know now, would you have made the same decision?
Oh, I would have made it sooner.
I say that all the time. I'm like, oh, if only I'd come sooner.
I definitely go, why didn't I know about this before? But like
Yes.
once I knew, it was like, oh, it's going to popping. Like I'm gone.
Yes, man. So that kind of makes me, it sparks this thing in my mind about exposure, which is the hallmark of why I do this show, and why most people that live abroad, start to share their experience with the world so that we can expose other people to the reality of the fact that yes, Black folks live everywhere. We work in all sorts of different sectors, and these opportunities are available to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so much of what I do is just about like for me when I talk to people about you can live abroad, it's not about just you can live abroad. You can have the life you want, right?
Yeah,
Whether that's abroad or whether you don't leave and you just no longer stay stuck in the
yeah,
position you're in the place you're in. Like know that there's a whole world out there for you, even if you only decide to think up, one zip code, like even if
yep,
that's all you want to do, you want
right,
your one country code, that's fine. Because for me, it's not about you making the move abroad. It's about knowing it's an option there for you. And if you want to take it, go leap.
exactly, exactly. And I would imagine that's what a lot of people don't have or are not aware that they have is options. But you have to know like that they're available, the resources are out there. That kind of life is a possibility for you. And sometimes I wonder if Black people, BIPOC people in the US especially, are so mired in the everyday living that we don't have the opportunity to really think about the possibility of moving beyond our zip codes or our comfort zones or our family units. Let me ask you this. How would you describe yourself?
Ooh, definitely adventurous.
Yes.
Like I'll try most things. I used to say all things, and then people started kind of testing me on that and dropping some stuff where I was like, yeah, no, I won't try that.
Boundaries.
Yeah. So, but most things I'll give at least like a once over. I love learning. I I'm a lot more patient than I was. That's part of like I feel like I am very patient now. I thought I was patient before I left. And then you go abroad and you realize
Mm,
that being
mm,
abroad, you need a
mm.
whole different set of patience that
Listen, for sure.
yeah. So um I think I'm lighthearted, but I have like I'm lighthearted, but I also know when to be like, no, this is business and
Yeah.
we're going to get this done. In my mind, maybe I'm a visionary. I don't know. That feels like a stretch, but like support is that's probably one of the most central things to me. And I realize like that's like a family trait is like being there for people is very important for me. Like,
Mm,
uh, yeah, that's really central to like how I define myself is like
mm.
I'm that friend that we may not talk all the time, but you call me in a time of need and I show up.
Yeah. Yeah. So being reliable, it's in those moments that matter most. Like you said, don't always have to be around, but there's always a connection in your most dire moment. And I think that is one of the most important qualities is dependability. And you have to have that moving abroad, but the person that you're really dependent on is yourself. And you learn so many things about yourself as an expat. So please, share with me what are some of the nuances of who you are and things that you've learned along your expat journey.
Like I said, patience. Patience is probably the biggest one that I've needed in every that list of countries, every single one I've needed
Especially
patience.
talking to child.
Yeah, I mean, but each one, even like Qatar, like they're different. Like it looks different. Like I
Yeah,
needed it for something different, but I can't say I needed more patience in China than I needed in Qatar. It was just very different. Like because there were
yeah,
certain things. China and Qatar, and they were right next to each other for me, were almost polar opposites. Like the things I loved about China, I didn't get in Qatar. And the stuff I loved about Qatar, I didn't get in China. So like people go, what's your favorite country? I'm like, well, each one has something different that I absolutely love and will go back for. And each has something where I'm like, can y'all work on this, please? You know, like, and it's not a better, there is one that I wasn't a big fan of, but there's not one that stands out as like the leader of like best.
Right.
Any, it might be Qatar, but that was more because I was there the longest and built the biggest community. And
Yeah.
I know we're going to talk about that. But some things I learned about myself. So that first one is patience, that ability to like sit and let some things happen and just go, God got it. He
Breathe.
got it. We all right. You know,
Yeah.
like that. Being flexible, because in that patience, you end up having to be flexible to things that operate and look very different than what you're used to, your regular, like, this is how I'm going. Um, I also feel like with the global pandemic, and I was working in China when that happened, I learned a sense of resilience that I have inside of me that I don't even think I knew I had, you know, that ability to kind of fight through something and, you know, get to the other side. And the other thing that I learned is I'm way better with people than I think I am, because I kind of have a snippy side to me. And so, like, I can be kind of rough at first, but like, I just know, like, I've accepted that. So, but I always thought that meant I wasn't good with people, but it wasn't true. It was like, yeah, I'm going to tell you how it is. Maybe sometimes I shouldn't, but I probably still will. But with that comes like a love and a support that is really hard to sometimes match, particularly in leadership. And so I've
Yeah.
learned that like people can still love on me. The fact that I can be a little bit blunt and, you know, to the point, and still really appreciate and see all the other that I, you know, I also offer. And that was definitely something that maybe I could have learned in the US, but I didn't. I think I always kind of was really critical of myself about it versus just accept who I am and all of the things that are me, and know that people can love you even with, like, none of us are out here perfect. So like, you know, people can love on you even through that. So those are probably some of the like nuances of me that either I knew and got reaffirmed, I developed, or I pulled out of a hat because I had to.
Right. Situational. And you grow through these things. I really appreciate, you know, what you just offered. And one of the things that really stood out to me is allowing people to care for you, right? And care for you as you grow and develop, and knowing that that's okay. And a key way to do that, I would imagine, is through building relationships. And in education, that's literally the lifeblood of the work that we do, is building relationships and creating safe spaces for children and families and maybe other people in our community that we expand to. But how would you compare your experience? Were you in leadership in the US as well?
Like teacher level leadership. So like teacher
Okay.
leader positions,
Okay.
like team
Still
lead.
leadership, because that does matter, because managing adults is something else. It is a
Yeah.
whole nother level of patience and fortitude for sure. I'm wondering, how would you compare your experience with in leadership and being respected in the United States to where you currently are, or as you moved abroad? Like, how would you compare those two experiences?
Whew, that's a good one, because I think that, like I said, when I was like that genesis that you talked about, I was really at the cusp of leaving, right? Like I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. And there were a couple of things that I look at and I know were missing for me, which is why I felt like that way. One, in undergrad, I studied organizational studies and sociology, and I was super involved in, I've been a leader since you could be a leader, right? You know what I mean? Like the second you started looking at people to be a leader,
Yeah.
I naturally just fell into those things. That's kind of just part of my spirit. I look at my mother and I look at my grandmother and I'm like, oh, I come from a lineage of women who are like this, you know. And that felt missing in a way. And in the US, because people stay at schools way longer,
and they should.
Positions in leadership open far less frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not in a certain way, you're not maybe even looked at. And so that was a bit difficult for me. And I didn't realize I was getting, to some degree, actually bored with teaching, and I needed the challenge of what leadership offers. I really want a dual role where now I like have some teaching and I, you know, do some leading, because I don't want to be too far off the pulse of like what's happening.
Yeah.
But needless to say, I do like the ability to like really solve large problems. And so I felt like in the US, one of the biggest differences is that in the US, there's less opportunity for people who may not, less opportunity in general for positions to even open and to get into leadership. And so that was one difference. And I also feel like because people stay for so long, sometimes change can be either easier because you can do it incrementally, or it can be a lot harder because those people have been there and they're not trying to do anything different. Yes. And that impacts leadership. Where internationally, you have every year you're hiring, every single, I don't care how great your school is. Every year you're hiring something. Like the best of best schools are going to be hiring every year. Now, the amount of hiring that they're doing may change, but even the best of schools internationally are going to have a wave of, oh, this year is a high hiring year because people leave in waves, right? Like you may only have a couple of people, and then bam, you get two people who, you know, all of a sudden, and a lot of times if you actually look at it, it really started with a couple of people who kind of were the glue for a couple of what I would call cohorts of people coming in, because we kind of come in groups in international schools. And so you get a couple of key people in that group who are like, yeah, I'm gone. And then it's like trickle, and next thing you know, 20 people are leaving.
Yeah.
Which is a big difference.
Add COVID to that. And it's like, oh, I gotta go.
Yeah. So then that also is a big impact on what leadership looks like, because you're like every year you're in a hiring space. And so you have to think differently. You also have to think differently about how you're going, like what are new initiatives you're going to take on, and does it make sense? Because we know the research says that initiatives take 3 to 5 years to really fully implement and be able to track success. International contracts are typically 2.
Right.
So, and people generally will stay about 3, you know, but after 3 years, somebody who's been at a school for 4 or more years is considered like an OG at a school internationally. But locally, you're there 4 years and you might still be new. You may still be the person with the least tenure, you know, at the school 4 years in, or there's like one person behind you. So I think managing that as a leader and understanding that as a leader really changes how things look. The other part that's dramatically different is that you're managing people who had various types of teacher training, right? And so, yes, I know that different universities are slightly different, but American teaching training has certain like ways that we do stuff. It's pretty much the same. And you might get some ebbs and flows of one school this more leans more this way, and but there's certain basics that are like common practice. All of the US. Same in South Africa, but you know what? They're not the same as what they are in the US.
No.
And then the UK has a certain practice, and Australia has one, New Zealand, and then, you know, Asian countries, and each of those have something slightly different. And when you're working at international school, you're pulling all those people together who not only have been teacher trained differently, but likely have also worked in different countries. And your experiences in these different countries, not just these different schools, but these different countries and schools, now as even another layer to like who they are as teachers. And because they are likely more transient, they've had more varied experiences. And so when you're at an international school and you're starting a year and you pride yourself on, I have staff from 50 different countries. Now you got to manage that. Like you have to get people, you know, like, and it's great. And I love it. I think it's one of the things that make planning and coming up with things beautiful and amazing. But as a leader, it can also be something that can be challenging. It's like, oh, you all have done it this way, and now I need to get everybody on one page in a short time, because I may not have you for long. I might only have you 2 or 3 years. And let's not talk about runners, right? Then you got to manage people who, oh, it's October break and you're not coming back. And I don't know it. I don't know it until after that break. And I'm like, oh.
I never understood that. That feels like the height of shadiness to me and unprofessional.
It is, but I've seen schools that almost ignite that as well. Like, just as much as it's unprofessional for them, one thing I would talk to clients about is like, you need to vet your school before you end up being a runner that you never thought you were, because the school isn't professional. The school isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like, now there are some people who run from the top tier schools. It wasn't for them. I tell people, living abroad is not for everyone. I think everybody should try it, and I think everybody should do it, but it is not for everyone, right? It is not a long-term lifestyle for everyone. So some people, they just shady and unprofessional. Some are young and don't know how to like actually, say like, hey, this isn't for me, let me leave. And then some schools make it really difficult that if you do tell them that this isn't for me and I want to leave, you may end up being in astronomical amount of debt. They may end up taking part of your paycheck. They may hold you in the country and not let you leave. So runner, I have mixed feelings about it, because I've seen where I'm like, well, y'all kind of are creating a culture of people to run, like you're like, and then you put in, every time somebody runs, you institute a new rule to try and stop people from running, that actually perpetuates the idea why people don't want to be here.
Exactly. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to consider in the leadership role. And I can only imagine the layer that so many cultural differences and cultural understandings adds to all of the administrative things that you have to do, the people management that you have to do. And so I want you to share, and I definitely, like, mental health is reverberating in my mind for sure right now, but when you think of the reason or the decisions that led you to choose a country, like if you were talking to a client right now, what would be some of the things that you would suggest people to consider when they are choosing where to live, where to work, and things of that nature?
So before I even start a call with a client, I send them a pre-call survey that has some of these questions, because I also think that sometimes we get in our mind a country we want to go to, but we don't actually, because we've heard people talk about it. Like, everybody I know in the world wants to go to the UAE. And the UAE is great for many people and it has great things. But depending on what your goals are, and that's really what's important. What is your goal for living abroad? Depending on what that goal is, the UAE may not be the best country. So some of the questions that I put in that pre-survey that somebody could just sit and think about are, how important is reliable internet to you?
Yes.
That's a thing, and people don't think about that. How important is money to you? Like, is your bottom line your bag? If your bottom line is your bag, there's some countries I tell you should have top on your list if your bottom line is making money. How much do you want community of people who look like you? That's something that's really important. How important is it to have access to products and services that you're used to? That impacts it. And those are just a few. I think I have about 8 to 10 ones that I kind of ask people to rate on a scale, their openness to those things, to kind of get a sense. Because sometimes you're like, I could do that. But other questions that aren't on there that you may want to consider are like, what are hobbies and activities and interests that you currently have that you want to continue? What are hobbies, activities, and interests that you have that you would like to start while being abroad? And then kind of like reaching out to communities to see if those are legitimately there, if they're only there on face value, or if they're not there, but people would actually be open and willing to start, you be the igniter of that as well. Because just because it's not there doesn't mean you don't go. You could be, the person who kind of ignites that. and starts that. So those are some of the things, but I really think goal setting about like, why is it that I'm deciding I'm going to leave my family, my friends, and move to a different country? What is the biggest reason I'm doing this?
Yeah.
And that should help guide you. If you have children, there are a few other questions I would ask. So I would ask some of those same things, but from your child's perspective. I really encourage parents, particularly because I'm on the hiring side and I hire people with kids, I've seen it go wrong and I've seen it go really well. The
Mhm.
parents who really, particularly as the child gets older, at about 10 and older, but I really think you can do it younger, but at worst, at 10 and up, kids should be actively involved in that process,
Oh, for sure.
particularly, yeah, particularly interviewing, no matter what your field is, if you're going to put them in school, assuming you're not going to world school or homeschool, if you're going to actually enroll them into a school, they should be interviewing that school as well. They should be on virtual visits, in-person visits. They should be looking through the website. You should be looking at what are the activities they're doing now that they want to carry on. Again, what are activities that they want to do or will be interested in doing that this new place might offer that they're not currently doing. So looking at that, even thinking about where you're going to live and what that space looks like for them, what they have access to, that's really, really important if you're a parent. If you're somebody who's thinking about moving elderly parents, because this is something also that comes up that now
Really?
I'm even thinking about. Yeah,
Okay.
sometimes people will move like older family members with them,
Okay.
particularly some people who have kids or their parents aren't old, but they are older. And
Right.
so their parents are coming along the journey with them, finding out, can you sponsor them on your visa? Or will they have to be on a tourist visa? What extensions and exceptions can be made for that tourist visa? Is there some type of a longer visa that would be offered to them? Those are important questions. I think because they're older, a lot of the other things is just making sure you're in conversation with them about, is this a place they're okay with? But I feel like they will be better able to kind of tell you no or yes,
Yeah.
particularly as your parent.
Yeah.
But I would really be thinking about the logistical aspects of it, of sponsorship, visas, because visas are one thing that I talk to people all the time about is know what your visa says, what it allows you to do, what it
Yeah.
doesn't allow you to do, what the penalties are for when you don't do those things or follow those things, and knowing where your company, whether that's your school, company, or if you're doing it independently, what are they going to do should something
Right.
not go right, and
Right.
what supports are being offered.
Yeah, that's very comprehensive. And I never even thought about, potentially moving, aging family members. Because one of the most important things that I found, and just in my own experience and interviewing and having friends and family here, is the level of community support really does impact your experience. And the more genuine, consistent support you have, especially if you have children, I think the easier of a time not only do parents have, but children as well. But I really appreciate. So I'm a counselor, um, work with lots of kids and families, and I love the perspective of including children in on the decision making process, especially after a certain age, because they are autonomous humans. They have opinions, they have desires and needs and wants, and if you want them to develop well, they need to have a voice in something that is going to greatly impact their life. Um, so I really like that additional element to the pre-work that you're having them to do. I'm curious about lots of things. You'll hear me say that so many times during this interview. I would really be interested in learning what has been part of this experience that you believe has been really impactful for your life, and how has choosing to be an expat really shifted your perspective and your priorities?
Ooh, two big questions.
Yeah, I
I'm
got
going to do the
a lot more coming.
I'll do the second part first, and then you might have to remind me of the first part. So the biggest shift I think that I really did was like I accepted that education is where I really want to be.
Mm,
And educational leadership is what I need to do.
mm.
Though that was probably paramount in now thinking about what's next, where do I go? The other part is I've also accepted I don't know what's next or where I'm going to go. like as much as I'm saying like I'm like, yes, I know there's a lot of gray that I'm kind of okay with. So like
Yeah.
anybody who's kind of been with me on this whole journey, who I've kept really good in contact with from back home, they don't ask me anymore, when am I coming back? Um, and it's not because I'm not, it's because I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
Like people hear I don't know and they go, oh, so you're never coming back. I'm like, that's not it. I just don't know. I just don't know. Like I honestly, when I left, didn't think I would be gone this long, so the
Yes.
fact that I'm still doing this, I'm entering my 7th school year abroad.
Wow. Okay.
I, I didn't think I would still be on this journey. I kind of was just like, literally somebody talked about it and I was like, oh, I want to do it. And, I had just started dating somebody before I moved abroad. And so I was like, I'll be back in a year because, whatever, that didn't end up working out. So here I am still doing it. But that was probably the biggest shift, is like really knowing I am an educator. Like
Mm.
no matter what I end up doing next, it'll always be in the vein of education. So like I also think that like when I work with people on like resumes and interviews, I think part of my strength is that I'm a teacher. So I'm not going to redo your resume. I'm going to teach you how to redo your resume so you don't need me again. So that like, I said that to somebody, like, I love that you're teaching people how to fish and not just giving them fish.
That was literally what was in my head. And I was like really stopping myself not to interrupt what you were saying.
But that's really important to me. It's because I had somebody redo my resume. She did a great job. But then I realized when I was looking for a job again, I was like, okay, now I got to go back to her. And I was like,
Right.
but, I knew I didn't need to. Like, I knew that I knew how to like form it, sell myself. And that's one thing I can do. I can get a job. I know that. And now doing so much on the other end of interviewing, people, I know what people are looking for. I've done it at multiple schools in multiple countries. So I've seen the various vantage points. So I think what stands out about like the resume and like I said, interview coaching is like, I know how to teach, like I can teach. It's not just like telling you, it's like, no, we're going to get through this process together and you're going to learn these skills so that you don't have to come to me again, but what you can do is send somebody my way. So like, I won't be dependent on you for reoccurring, services, but I'm dependent on you to say, this woman was phenomenal.
Yep.
You should use her too, because I can't still really tell you how to do it, but I know what I'm doing now for myself.
Exactly. And then that customer base.
Yeah. So and I used to think that I could only do that for people in education because that's my niche. I know teaching, but I realized, no, I know how to sell myself. Like I know how to present myself, and that transcends occupations, that transcends
very transferable.
And having done it in multiple countries, it also transcends country, I realized, so I've helped people in like cybersecurity, marketing, all these different fields, finance that I never thought I would jump into, but they had friends or they saw me speak and share somewhere and they're like, oh yeah, I could use the worldwide educator, for something. And that also was a big confidence builder. It's like, oh, wow, I have success beyond just educators. And educators sometimes don't want to spend the money. They're like, but then they're like, I've interviewed at 30 schools.
Like time is money.
So, right. And you're also missing out on it.
Exactly.
Right. And now you're not able to leverage having multiple offers because you have none. And being competitive is saying, oh, I have 3 offers on the table. Yep. This one is this one is that. Maybe the one you really want isn't offering what you want. You now have a bucket to be like, well, I got this. Can you match this? Because I want to come here. Yeah. Can you match this or can you beat this? So it's not just time is money. It's like you're actually giving up money at the table because you don't have money at the table. So
I like that perspective. So one other part of that question was, what has been one of the most impactful experiences that you've been a part of since living abroad?
This is going to sound negative, but it's by far the most impactful for
I don't
me.
judge. I do not judge. I don't know where impact comes. So
so during the global pandemic, I ended up losing my job in China because I got trapped out of China. I was actually kind of devastated. Like, that was like my dream job. I was making good money. Cost of living in China is next to nothing. I quickly built a community. Yeah, quickly built a community. And so that losing of the job and the timing was interesting. So like I tell people, there were like 3 waves of like how China kind of approached people losing or returning, right? There was the first wave where in January, February, there's like, nope, you gone, you not here, bye. There's a set of people who lost their jobs then. I wasn't in that set. Mm-hmm. Then there was another set who lost it closer to the end of the school year. Like, yeah, I don't see this getting better. We don't think we're going to be able to get you back. Unfortunately, we're going to have to cut ties. I was in that set. So you're talking about, it's the end of the school year. Now, mind you, I talk to clients that if you're thinking about going abroad, think about if the school year is like 2023, right? This is the next school year. You need to be ready October, November, December.
Yep. Yep.
Right? That's when you should be ready and starting to look. I got let go in June.
So unfair.
So I was in this weird position. So that was wave 2. And then wave 3 were people who waited. And then in July, China offered, ways to actually get back, to get their people back. So I had just missed the wave of being able to actually go back to my job. And I'm super late in looking for a job. I operated out of desperation. And that's like so I took a job that I knew was in a country I didn't want to go to, was at a school I didn't believe in, and was in a position I didn't want. And at a pay rate that was less than what I was making. I should not have gone. But fear and worry and lack of faith in there is something else out there. I was like, well, I don't see nothing else on the table. I know it's late because by the time I accepted it was July. I'll just go. It can't be that bad. Oh, it could. Oh, it could.
Always.
And there's so much of that experience, which is why I feel like coaching people became really important to me, is because I had seen my mistakes. I saw my mistakes of like, I don't regret the school I went to in Qatar, but I learned about how to look at schools and vet schools and things like that there in like countries and what I wanted. I love China, but that didn't, work out long. And then Kuwait just wasn't for me. I ended up actually resigning and not even finishing the school year because of how much it was taking a toll on my mental well-being. And I chose me over that.
Thank you.
And that was like a really, really important lesson that I wouldn't have probably had to make that choice had I actually looked at the realities of what I was signing up for in the first place.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to know you can quit and do better afterwards and like be resilient and there can be something on the other end was amazing. Like, so I also am like, I would never take back that bad decision because of the learning that happened. Like, I learned how to be so okay with Adrienne. I learned how to, like, when we start talking about mental health, like, if nothing else, that as much as it took a toll on me, there were lots of things I was doing to try and prevent it because I could feel it. So there were a lot of ways I was actioning to try and like support myself. But in the end, I also had to realize that all of those things didn't matter because you spend a large portion of your day at work. And then the other portion of the day is in that country. And neither were working for me. So like, I don't care how many times I'm journaling and, reaching out to friends and scripture reading and, seeking, psychological support. None of that matters when 24 hours of your day are taken up by things that don't bring you happiness, don't bring you
Yeah.
joy. And
You are
not only
saying
don't bring you
words.
joy, they actually are because there's also a net neutral, right? It's not just that they don't bring you joy, it's that they're actually bringing you pain, emotional toil, depression. Like, I had to accept this won't ever work for me. It doesn't matter how I put this together, it's not going to work. This is not my space. And so
Wow.
leaving was by far the best lesson. Like, taking the job and realizing, oh, I shouldn't have. I should have trusted me. Like, I should have bet on myself. Like, that's the biggest lesson. I can bet on me. And then when I decided I didn't bet on me, I also have the power to leave and I have the power to say no. And so, like, I have a post all about different ways to tell people no. But it really was sparked by being in that space where I should have said no. Just because you gave me an offer doesn't mean I have to accept. And like, that's something else I talk to clients is like, you're interviewing, and I feel like so often we're interviewing from a space of, we need you, I need this job, this job, versus I go into interviews now like, oh no, you need me. I'm I'm that magic sauce, like I'm black girl magic amplified, like I don't go into it with an idea of the job being necessitating my life. Rather, you all are going to get a big benefit from having me. And that confidence comes through, not in the way that I won't benefit from the school, but if you don't make me an offer, I don't think I've lost. I think you have.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, you have said so much, which really does lead me into the next portion of this. But I have to note that I know you said at the beginning of, sharing this part of your story, this might sound negative, and I just listening to you, I really believe that that was meant to happen. Like, you had to make that decision in order for all these other realizations to be unearthed and to learn that, again, like you said, you're the prize, right? It's not necessarily what can the school do for you. It's what is it, no, the other way around, not what you can do for the school, but what can the school do to enrich your life. And just the part of the acceptance and realizing, not only am I not well in this work environment, living here is not bringing me the benefit that I need to thrive. And that segues into, how do you believe your mental health has been impacted as you traverse through this journey of living abroad?
Overall, like, in getting through that, I would say that it's been so much a positive impact. So from the beginning, it was a positive impact because I had a better work-life balance. Like, I was able to go to work and leave most of work at work. I didn't need to take a lot home. And just that alone, that fact that, like, work isn't always ever present, like, I can actually have a life, like, and not be worried about what I didn't get done and things like that was a really big chunk. I also think so. I'm from, like, Michigan. I lived in Chicago for a while. So places where seasonal depression is, like, real, like very real, to the fact that you may not see much sun for, an extended period of time. Moving to places where the sun is out and there's so much you can do outside for a considerable amount of the year also was really good for me. Not worrying about money in the same way and having, like, a bit of financial freedom allowed me to try out and experience and explore things. It also keeps, because I'm not past tense, but keeps me in a better space. I also think that it's much easier, and this is going to sound crazy, I think it's easier to move from one country to another than it is to move from one state to another. And the reason I say that is because when you move abroad, everybody knows you don't have a network, you don't have this, you don't have that. And people are looking and seeking. If you're on a teacher schedule, they know the season of when you're coming, right?
Yeah.
And so people are looking to be supportive and to
Yes.
help you and to fill in those missing voids that a
Right.
mom, a cousin, a auntie would fill in. But when you move from state to state, there are places that aren't even really used to transientness, like, aren't used to having people not from here. Like everybody from here is from here. Like,
Yeah.
like
We have
no new
our
friends,
network. Yeah.
right? Like kind of like no new friends, whole cities,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
where abroad that's really hard because you probably were that person yourself not too long ago. And even if it was 10, 15 years ago, you still remember what it was like, And so I feel like to some degree that move can be easier because there's a support that's there, which also can be very good for your mental well-being. The
Yeah.
other thing is I've been able to advance my career, explore things in ways that was really difficult, which also has reaffirmed, like I get affirmations of like, I'm great and amazing. And not that I need somebody to always be in my ear saying that, but it is nice.
We need the recognition every now and again.
Right. It's good to see that like I add value, my presence matters, things like that. And so those are like the pieces that I think that are almost like intangible that you get from living abroad. But I also try to be very transparent and well-rounded in talking about it, because yes, all those things are great, but there are some ways that I've seen it go left for people as well. It can be hard to build community. That first 6 months can be really hard because you hang out with people those first 6 months, you're like, oh, I'm really only hanging out with you because we're in the same country.
Right. And we work
really we really wouldn't be friends in any other space. So like finding the people you would actually want to continue a journey of life with you, that you want to continue talking to 3 countries later, that can be a little bit difficult. If you end up, not all these schools are great. You end up at a school that is, or a company that's kind of ragtag, that can be really difficult. Being away from family and what's familiar, like wanting to get a Verner's and you can't get a Verner's because there's no Verner's around.
What is that? Is that burger joint?
No, so Verner's is a ginger ale that is made in Michigan.
Ooh, Canada Dry. Ooh, yes.
So it's not Canada Dry. So people from Michigan, if you give us a Canada Dry, people are like, what is this? It's dry, just like it says. Like, so like, and mind you, even depending on where you are in the US, you may not be able to get a Verner's, but like being able to say like, oh, like Chipotle is not as big internationally. I think I've only seen it in like the UK, like Europe area, but like everywhere else, I haven't seen a Chipotle, and I love Chipotle. So like just having those nuances, or you're living in the Middle East in China and you want to go buy some Carol's daughter, you're not going to the grocery store and getting that, like that's just not a thing. One thing I loved about moving to Cayman was like, it's a bunch of people who look like me. So you can go to the grocery store and buy Do Grow. Like I did a whole live, like, look y'all, look how
they got it. They got, and it's not locked up behind a plastic shelf.
Right. And it's real. It's because in China you could get some stuff. You're like, this is.
Listen, I have been debating whether to buy the sunscreen that I love. It's called Black Girl Sunscreen, and it is amazing. And I found it on Taobao, and I'm just like, do I really want to do that? I don't know.
Yeah, it's so like those things, like, and it sounds trivial until like you go through the normal things of life, and then that trivial thing can be the thing that can be the thing that goes beyond. Because the other thing people forget is I'm not on vacation. I am, people do all that posting on Instagram, living my best life. Like, no, you're living life. Like, I hope it's your best life, but like that comes with days at work that are hard, people being rude, not something not going your way, your car breaking down, like all of those things that you were dealing with before, you still have to deal with in some kind of way. They may not look the exact same, but you still have to deal with them. And so those days where you're dealing with the normal and you're like, relationship didn't work out, you you thought this guy was great and he doesn't call you back, or you see him out with somebody else. Like those things still happen. Like, that stuff is still real. And then you just want to go get that pint of Ben and Jerry's you want, and you can't, like those things are the other end. But I still feel like even with all of that and, like technology, the other thing the pandemic was actually really good for is like being international. I used to literally have every type of app on my phone so that people could contact in like a video format. Mm-hmm. You name it, I had it. Because somebody's like, well, I don't have an iPhone. That's fine. I got this. I don't have this. Oh, I got that. Like, what is your means of you will stay in contact with me? So I'm on all these different things. Now it's so normal to do a video call, to, jump on and connect with people in digital ways from a distance. That, like, it's made it so much easier to just stay in contact. And there's more things I can attend back home that I couldn't before. Like, oh, we all want to get together. Let's do a Zoom.
Yeah.
And there it's done. And that just wasn't really happening before. So
and all that was also. I'm sorry. And I would say all of that brings about a type of normalcy that we need to be able to get through these really difficult days that can happen when you are living abroad. I want to ask you, this is a question that I ask everyone. When it comes to like the concept of mental health and your familial understanding or introduction, can you recall at any point growing up where there were discussions about mental health, or there was an introduction into the importance of mental health growing up?
I can't say it was per se an introduction to the importance, but I definitely know that we've had many discussions, and some of it's just because I have some family members who deal with depression. Mm-hmm. I have some family members who have autism. So because I have lived people who are 15, I'm not talking about people who are like my cousin twice removed or my daddy's uncle's side, like none of that, but people who are relatively close, like cousins and things like that, where the distance is not far. There were some discussions about it, but it still wasn't in the way of like, I feel like it was always like people with something versus the discussion of like, everybody can go get therapy, like anybody, like you don't have to have some diagnosis. It doesn't have to be, like some severe case of like, bipolar,
or trauma.
Trauma. Like, you don't have to have been raped or, experienced some, great loss. Like, it doesn't have to be any of that. There were no conversations about that, hey, just as like a general good practice, you should have a therapist. That was never a conversation. I still don't know how much those are conversations, I feel like it's happening more. And there's some things that are very helpful, like therapy for Black girls is one that's really great about like really getting, those ideas out there, being able to connect and find Black therapists. So there are more things that are out there and available, and things like even your podcast is an example. But I can't say that the discussions about like normal everyday, therapy and support were even breached as like a thing. But I can't say that we didn't talk about it. Like, I do think that there were discussions about it. And even now, like me and my mom will sit and talk about like being able to recognize when you might be entering into a depressive state, and like, what do you do? Like, can you recognize that? Because that's really important to be able to recognize what your triggers are that are going to, because it happens quickly once it starts, and everybody goes through depression at some point, right? Like, that's like, having depression is one thing, but like, no matter who you are, you will deal with depression, and being able to recognize that in yourself. And then also, so that's step one, like Alcoholics Anonymous. First, you have to know you have a problem. And then like, what is the steps that you take to like hold it off, correct it, course, adjust, so that you don't go, down that road. And for each person, that's really different, right? You know what I mean? Like, I can tell like I'm not getting enough sleep. So sleep is something that I like really prioritize as being really important to my mental health. Like, but it doesn't naturally say, like, people may not naturally think of it that way, but like, I know being well rested is really, really important for me to like actually be a great functioning human being in
Right.
society. I also know that like fresh air and exercise are really important for me. And so I bought a bike, and it's been one of the greatest things that I've done.
Yeah, I
Um,
love mine.
yeah, and so like it can rain a lot in Cayman, and so a coworker was like, "Oh, well, you know, the days that it's raining, you can ride the bike inside, you know, on a stationary bike." I was like, because in their mind, I'm doing it for exercise, which I
Right.
am, but that's like the exercise is almost like a bonus to the wellness experience it gives
Right.
me.
Just being
And you know,
present
I said,
outdoors.
yeah, I was like, yeah, I probably won't. I said, because when I ride my bike, I was like, thank you. I probably won't, because when I ride my bike, it's the entire experience of the fresh air, the struggle of up the little bit of hill, the oneness with it, and the just nobody's around me. Like, nobody's going to stop and start talking to me when I'm riding my bicycle
Right.
outside. But if I'm on a stationary bike at the school, somebody comes up, "Oh, Adrienne, no, no, I'm gone." You know, so there's so many elements of it that I really appreciate. It allows me to kind of decompress, and the sweat even just feels good to me. So I noticed that the days where I don't work out and do something to get my, you know, blood flowing, I also can see that impact in how I feel the day. My diet, so like paying attention to all those little things that in and of themselves seem very like trivial, but diet, exercise, doing things that I enjoy and finding things to go to, has been really important. Like, I never thought I would like snorkeling. I snorkel, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, so and being open to new experiences, because I never thought, like I said, I only went snorkeling the few times I did just to get out and be with people. Like, that's why I did it. I was like, I don't really want to do this, but this group is going, it gets me out the house, I'll go.
Yeah.
Um, and now I'm like, oh, you want to go snorkeling? One other person. We don't need a group. It's just the two of us. And I love it.
I really appreciate that, because what you honestly just shared is people understanding how to take care of their basic needs consistently is going to be a stopgap or help you, or to mitigate any experience with depressive symptoms or anxiety or any other type of mental health episode that they might encounter. But one of the key things that you also said was to realize the things that trigger these feelings in you and have an attitude of acceptance, because we will all have bouts of something at some point. But I would definitely say the more that we deny what we're experiencing, the more difficult it is to be able to work through that. So because clearly you are an ambitious, educated, hardworking, goal-oriented Black woman. And all those things wrapped up in Black women can present some difficulties when it comes to like really taking care of ourselves. And as an expat, I'm curious to know, in addition to like some of the things that you shared, what have been some of the are there like professional resources where you are that either you are aware of or that you've utilized when you are experiencing some difficult moments?
So through our insurance company, they actually, so I wish, and so this is actually something, ironically, I know that when I interview next and I'm looking for employers, I'll be asking different questions about my health insurance plan,
Yeah.
because my current health insurance plan does not actually cover therapy. And so,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it doesn't. And it's not something I thought of ahead of time, but I know it's something as I move forward. And when I talk to clients, I talk to them about, but they do offer X amount of free sessions of therapy, that, and some other resources. So I know that those are there. And I really think that starting with your insurance is a really great place to start.
Yes.
I also know that when I wasn't working, that I had used, and they gave really good discounted rates if you're not working. It's online. Ooh, Why is my brain drawing a blank?
Would it be
Can you
like
edit
BetterHelp
some?
or Talkspace or one of those types of companies?
Yeah, it was like an online one, but when you
Okay.
start dealing with therapists in the United States, you start getting into, who can practice where.
Yep.
Um,
Organic.
Internationally, yeah, I know, like I've talked to some friends who, when they did find therapists, they're very intentional about the type of therapist that they find, like where they're from, their lived experiences being important. I know quite a few people who struggled with therapists who weren't also expats because there's an experience that we live that is very different. That the therapist may be great, but because they don't have an understanding of what it means to pick up and move somewhere else and to be without friends and family,
Right.
may not be able to actually coach you and support you in the way that you really need. So those are some things that I can think of. But like I said, because it's not offered as part of my insurance plan, it's been something that I try to be very, I try to be very
Right.
intentional, right? I try to be very intentional about, because I know that, but I know that next chapter that I'm not taking positions where that's not covered,
Yeah.
or where my salary isn't at a point where I'm like, okay, that's fine, you're not covering it,
Exactly.
I got this.
But I
And I'm
would
just not there.
imagine, like, especially in this climate, I think it is just a dereliction of duty for companies not to offer resources that are going to support people's mental health, just like the world that we live in and everything that's happening. There's so many known factors, unknown factors that impact the way people live, and their mental health is number one. Like you were saying, with that being a focus in your interview, it is always something I've asked. What does wellness support, holistic wellness support, look like from the head of the school all the way down to the teaching staff and other personnel? Because if it's not a priority, that's a problem.
Right. Now, I will say, in terms of like wellness, the school does try to do that on like a school level, but in terms
Okay.
of it being covered for like external services, not so much. And so,
Yeah.
and both are important, right? Like understanding like both how on a day to day you're going to be taken care of, and then also what are your options to actually sit down with somebody is also important. And so
Yeah.
I think I had always only thought about the like well-being side of it versus like what's actually covered in this insurance, so that I can supplement, like, great, there's well-being. I need somebody weekly to kind of talk to and grow from,
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly. I know you touched on this a little, as far as what you've learned that you need to do when it comes to prioritizing your mental health, taking care of yourself. Can you share with, well, have you noticed like any shifts in your holistic wellness from like living in the States to once you began the journey abroad? Like, what did you really learn about yourself mental health wise through these particular experiences?
Like I said, like I learned how important like exercising and doing that. Like it sounds like exercise and sleep, like how important, and eating. Like those three are probably the principal things that I really learned, which I should have known already. Like,
No, you should. Some of those you're not taught. Those are literally so like the sleep, the exercise, the hydration. Oh, I'm forgetting one. And eating are the things that therapists always look at these, monitor these, improve these, and then we'll see what happens. Like the basic needs is.
and why didn't I think about that in the US? I don't know. Like I get like that's the part that I'm like, I don't know why. Like, and I'm
Survival.
not saying I didn't think about them at all, but like how I thought about them in terms of them impacting my mental well-being. And I think maybe just I felt like in the US there was so much I was constantly, managing, that maybe I just didn't even have the time to take out to figure out like,
Yeah.
oh, this is actually, something that's impacted me. Like I've
Yeah.
always known sleep is important to me, but sleep impacts my mood, it impacts my productivity. There's so many things there. So like I get sleep. Like I don't really pull all-nighters. I'm not like, even in college, I was not an all-nighter puller. Like no, I'm going to bed. I'll wake up in the morning and I'll finish studying.
Yeah.
But even like food intake and what I'm eating. And so like now I'll always be looking for meal prep places. For meal prepping is also something that I learned from my brother when I would come home and visit. But really, when I was working and doing it, like I was like, oh, I'm not just paying for the food to be healthy. I'm paying for the gift of time so that I can sit and either do something else I want to or do nothing. Like, that's another one I think that like I never had thought about house help before living abroad, and always thought of house help as like these like hoity-toity people with a whole lot of money versus, regular old me.
Yeah.
I will always get house help now. Like, and and when you tell people back home, they look at you like, oh, you think,
you there? Yeah.
yeah, like, oh, you got it like that. And it's like, well, it's not really expensive, but it's also really good for me. You know what I mean? Like, what is today? Today is Wednesday, right?
Wednesday.
Shoot, I need to talk to my friend because I need them to leave the money for the housekeeper to come there today. So,
mine on vacation.
Well, because I get back on Friday. So
Yeah.
I wanted to already be ready. Like, that's super important. So, but like, that's something like I had to start to realize that there are only 24 hours in a day. And I need at least 6 to 8 hours of those that day is sleep. Another 8 hours or 8 to 10 hours, depending, is work.
Yeah.
So you talking about now I have maybe 6 hours left and I work out and whatnot. Cooking is something that takes up a time that may not be the best use of my time. And I may not, because I'm tired, I may not actually make the most healthy thing. So I found a great meal prep lady. I pay her once a month, and every day for lunch, I have a healthy, delicious meal. So now I'm like, okay, I can cook dinner. Like I'm all right because I don't have to prep this and that. You know what I mean? And for breakfast, I make my smoothies and my little protein energy balls, and I'm good, So it's just really dinner that was like something that I have to think about. And now, like, I'll make enough because it's just me. I'll make enough and I'll freeze part of it. And so I'll do that 3 or 4 times in a row. And then I can go back and I can grab one of the freezer meals. And if one day at school, I ate lunch at school, I have one of my meal preps that I can convert to a dinner as well. So now I feel like I don't feel so overwhelmed. I feel like I can woosah for myself and I don't feel bad that And then I try to make time and find affordable ways to get like massages and facials and things that take care of me. I don't do my hair and I don't do my nails. Those are also self-care things for me. It's like somebody's like, oh, you can. I realize that I don't just go for the fact that somebody's getting it done. I go so that I can just detox and relax. Sometimes we're doing my nails and I'm doing a little bit of work, so now I can multitask. But if I'm doing my nails, I can't do anything else. And then the last thing I would kind of add in there that I learned abroad are like actually podcasts and audiobooks have been really, really good for like mental well-being. Is like audiobooks and podcasts really keep my mind stimulated in a way, and I can do that while I'm doing other things, right? Like, because finding the time to sit and just read just is not something I'm not saying I don't do it. I'm not illiterate or anything like that, but it's hard to find that time where I can dedicate and I'm not multitasking. Like, I don't even watch TV and just watch TV. Like, I'm always doing like kind of doing 2 things just to get through all the like my ambition. Like I can't reach all these goals if I'm, but I know that I have to also be well. And so like getting audiobooks and doing those type of things have also been really important.
I like that. Well, share with me. Well, you've already shared it, like the prioritization of rest. That is definitely one of the big goals that I have moving forward, because someone that is equally as ambitious, and I deal with anxiety even as a professional. The concept of rest and really giving myself permission to be less active, not necessarily less productive, but just to sit and be present and be mindful is really key to like recuperating from the wear and tear, the demands of the day, all of the pulling that takes place in the work that you do in education, myself as well.
So what was the question? I'm sorry.
I don't even think it was a question. I think I was just
okay. I just want to make sure.
And thinking of like rest is the overarching priority moving forward. Just listening to what you just shared. I want to segue into briefly like community. You've mentioned community a few times, and I know we both know as expats. So you say you've been abroad 7 years. I've been abroad 4 years, much longer than I thought. How would you say, like, what are some things that you noticed you've done to begin to create community in the countries that you've lived in?
Each country's been a little bit different. And I think that's important to realize that how you go about forming community in different places might look different. One that I absolutely use all the time, and now there's an extension I would add to this, is getting onto Facebook and joining brothers and sisters of said country, said city. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's been really great, particularly because I'm in a sorority, so I'll also throw in there, hey, yada yada stores, and that's been also really helpful. So like, I got into China on let's say I got into China on a Thursday. On Sunday, I was at brunch with the stores. like that's that's how like China was just like, I really hit the ground running and building community there because I knew what I didn't know. Like I had joined Brothers and Sisters of China, which is a little bit different because Facebook is blocked, but people do still periodically go on there and then pull you into the WeChat groups, into the different things that you need to be a part of. But knowing, hey, start here was really, really helpful. So joining those type of spaces, the expat app, which is now available, which was not available when I left, is a great space to do some of those similar things. Internations is another good one that they host a lot of events. Meetup is a really good one. And so Meetup is like global. And so that will help with particularly finding people of similar interests. Like you're a cyclist, you want to find cyclists. You're a knitter, you want to find people who knit, those type of things. Or like I had an ex who found like a group of guys who would go smoke cigars together. And so and he found that on, I think that one was Internations or Meetup, I can't remember, but like there's all these different ways, reaching out to your school early and asking them for help and assistance about like, what are groups that I can join? What are groups? Sometimes there are groups that are just small enough within your school. So like when I was in China, there was a Black Girl Magic group that I was added into. And so like we went to like what's that thing that you do?
KTV.
Yeah, KTV. There you go. We did KTV together. Yeah, they helped me with like, I wasn't there yet, and so they had like a buying and selling group where you could buy and sell things before you got there, and they collected everything for me, and had me all set up and ready for when I came over. Cayman was a little bit harder, and I think I realized it's Westernness of how like Western it is, and its proximity to the United States really changed how that looked. So this one was a little bit more difficult for me, but it was still being willing to like join groups. And like I said, I joined that snorkeling group just to like get out and snorkel. I also, through my time where I was like, I learned how to be okay with just me. That was like the one thing. So like, I actually made friends because I was willing to go sit at the bar and eat dinner by myself, I
will do that any day of the week in a heartbeat.
Right. And I met in doing that, I met a really dope friend who also was an assistant principal, also lived in the US, also, it was like, where have you been? And that was really helpful. But she grew up part of her time in the US and part of her time in Cayman. So she has a real good understanding of local culture and customs, but also
Right.
where I'm coming from and what I would be thinking.
Yeah.
And so that was really helpful going out with her. Then I met somebody else and like I joined a flag football league. And so that's been really helpful. And that's also tons of fun because it's like co-ed. And I touched down on Friday. My coach is like, we got a game Friday. You coming? I'm like, I'll be there. I'll be there. So like, you know, finding spaces. And I had never played flag football before, but I was like, oh, when I was in Chicago, I had friends who did it. It looked like a lot of fun. I knew friends who had played flag football. So I was like, oh, I'm going to try this out. The other thing is I had gone and I was at like a bar after work on a Friday, and all of these people who looked like me swarmed in. I was like, who are these people? And they're like,
Right.
oh, that's the flag football league. I was like, I want to join. So like I was on a mission to like join this league. And you know, it was nice because towards the end of the season, it was still like it took a second to even like get to know people outside of my team there. But by the end, people were like, oh, she keeps coming around. Like, and one girl's like, oh, you got to play women's league. And I was like, I'm not doing that. She's like, no, do the. So now I'm playing women's league. Like I had no thought of I would do that. And a new coworker saw a post where they tagged me in the post because my team won the championship for co-ed. You know, we were the
Okay.
champions.
Congratulations.
She saw that, and then she saw them release the rosters for the women's league, and she's like, can I get in? I was like, I don't know. So now she's going to be playing with us. Like, it's just really like I feel like it takes you have to be willing to like make some of those steps, both to meet people in any setting and kind of like, you know, be willing, but also there are lots of resources that can make that a lot easier for you.
Yeah.
And Instagram and Facebook are really, really good for being
Yeah.
able to find like-minded people in the places that you're going, and to
Right.
find like the girl who's coming, she's going to start her locks again. She found somebody in Cayman already to do that. And I think she already scheduled an appointment and everything. Like there's so many things that you can do before you step foot in country to really help you.
Right.
And I think, and people want, like the thing to remember is if you haven't done this before, people want to help you. People want to show you how to get around. So
Right.
be willing to just ask. And somebody is going to be like, sis, bruh, I
Right.
got you.
Right.
Like, and you know, take you. And that may not be your forever person. That was the other thing I had to learn is like, frequently the people who kind of help you adjust when you first get there may not be your long haul people for the experience, but they're what you need for that short chapter
Yeah.
of transition. And so
Right.
that's okay. And it's okay. Like I used to feel bad, like, oh, I don't know if this friendship's gonna work out.
Right.
No, it's okay. It didn't work out. That
Right.
they weren't meant for you in that capacity, and that's okay.
Exactly. So it's really learning how to accept people for the time that they are in your life and for the benefit, and not necessarily in a transactional manner, because I'm not a transactional
Right.
by any means,
Right. Me either.
but knowing when to cut the cord. And that doesn't mean that you extricate people from your life indefinitely, but certain people serve a certain purpose, and sometimes that is helping you to get settled. But something I really appreciate that you said is, well, one thing is really doing the prep work before you move to a place. I know that there might be certain people that can just up and move with no plan, but that's normally not the case when you're really trying to move your life to another country and thrive in that country. There is a considerable amount of pre-planning, working through what are your reasons, because I often find a lot of people that are running from things back home, and that is a huge motivator to leave, and that often does not end well. So I definitely want to see more people look to thrive as opposed to run from something when they choose this type of life, because it can be, like you said earlier, it's not for everyone. And one of the qualities that every person that I've interviewed has in common is adventurous or risk taker, as a thread to living this particular type of life. So We are nearing our the end of our conversation. It's so good though, but I need to ask you, in what ways do you believe that you're currently, or would you like to in the future, impact your community?
Oh, I definitely think
That's an easy answer.
not in a cocky way, but that's
Oh,
really important.
God.
You know, like in the beginning, I said support is really important to me, right? So like that's just what I do. That carries on with me. So there's a few different ways in different spaces, right? So there's different spaces in which I feel like I'm supporting communities. Some are expat communities and some are not. Some are communities that are still important to me that are back here. So like I'm planning my class reunion. That's like a way of like offering support. I'm on what's called the Teacher Action Board for something called Black on Black Education, which is really US based, but global education is education, and Black experience is Black experience. That's like those things are kind of global, and so I'm a part of that. But the other thing that I do that I think is really special and unique, particularly for the expat world, is I run a club on Clubhouse, which yes, Clubhouse is still around, yes, people still get on, but Clubhouse, every Sunday I run a room that's called Living Life Abroad, and we go through tons of topics, and the rooms are always on replay. And so you could go, if you join now, and if you need an invite, I can get you an invite either through myself or through the club, because there's just so much rich content that's on there. And like I tell people that Living Life Abroad has like kind of like 3 target audiences: people who are abroad, and so we're a community for each other,
Right.
People who lived abroad and miss it, and you know, still feel very like, once you go abroad, there's no taking that back from you.
Ever.
Right? Like
there's always like this tether, like this pull.
Yep.
Like I'm stuck in between these two worlds.
Yeah. And then the people who are aspiring to be. And I feel like it's a club that nicely allows everybody to have a nice space there to share their experiences, get their questions answered, put their thoughts out there. And so I say expat, repat, and wannapat. Like all those different,
I like that.
All the different versions. And we go from everything to how to get your job abroad to best and worst parts, do's and don'ts. Like you can look through the club and it's just like tons and tons. Like once replays were a thing, we were replaying, you know, like, and sometimes they're kind of fun. And it's like, we're just kind of like swapping stories and laughing with each other. Other times, like people are like asking questions like, how do you make sure you're financially secure while you're abroad? Because as much as I talk about it's been helpful financially, if you don't make good decisions, it doesn't have to be, right? You know, and I do think you can be running from something, but you need to have a plan of where, as you run from, where are you running to? Always. Like I think the fail of people running from is that they haven't figured out where they're running to.
Right.
If you're running
that
from,
wasn't part of the plan though, right? So
right.
How are you able to pivot in the process to really see that, okay, you made this decision, how are you going to allow it to, you know, improve your goings, like your future?
Because I'm not like I will say I felt like I was running to experiences, knowledge, and things, but I was also leaving behind the stress of US education, all of that. Like, so I can't sit up here and lie to you and say, well, I just had a plan of where I was going. And yes, I did. I wanted to get out of debt, but that meant I was also leaving continuing debt behind. And like, you know, in 3 years, I became completely debt free from living abroad. And that's like a big part of what I talk to people about is like 3 years, over $30,000 of debt cleared.
I'm almost there. I can't wait.
Mind you, I was still traveling. I didn't give up going to countries. So it wasn't only 3 years, $30,000 of debt. I think I also got to 20 countries in that same amount of time. So it wasn't like I was just sitting back doing nothing. I still went to brunches. I still, you know, went out and hung out. And I didn't do a whole bunch of tutoring, you know, like, because that's what most people do is like they tutor. And I said, I didn't move abroad to spend all of my time working. Like I didn't. Like they're like, oh, you don't tutor? No. I was a substitute tutor. So my one friend, when she couldn't tutor, I would tutor for her. And so they trusted.
Where were you in Beijing? I'm sorry.
No, I was in
Where were
Shanghai.
you in China?
I was in Shanghai.
Oh, okay. I know a few people in Shanghai. Okay.
Yeah, I
I didn't
loved
mean
it.
to interrupt.
Oh, girl, you're fine. Another way that I was giving back when I was in China, but the pandemic kind of stopped that is myself and another girl had started a series called Sip and Share, where it was a new approach to professional development, where it was like curated by us, but it was with brunch. So you were eating brunch, it was laid back. Because how often do you go and you sit and you spend the whole time talking,
The whole time.
about work in school, but not in a formed way, not in a way that was enriching you. It was more just in a way to complain while you drink and you eat. And so we said, well, why have we divorced these things? Why don't we think we can actually do PD and have drinks and have food? And
I
so we
literally
put
did
those
that
together,
too.
and that was a great experience. But not being able to get back to China, we haven't been. We did one where I was at a distance, but it just was too difficult. And so now, like I said, living life abroad is one. The consulting work I do, like I do give anybody 15 free minutes of like, we can check in, but the paid services are very reasonable for the amount that you're getting as well. Like I'm going to give you a suite of things. Like if you do a mock interview with me, you're going to get all the questions that we answered with your answers, with your recording, with supplemental questions you should prepare for in between time, along with all the feedback that you get. That's a whole lot of stuff that you can use that aren't just the time. You're not just paying for the time we're together. You're also getting all these other things that you can continue to work on without me. And so I feel like that those are other ways I give back. But anybody who's willing, who wants to talk and needs something, like I'm always, like as my daddy would say, Johnny on the spot, like there and ready to share. But if you just want unfeathered information, I would say come on a Sunday. And I do them Sunday mornings, 8 a.m. Eastern, very intentionally, because it's one of the few times that most of the world is awake.
Yeah.
Most of the world, like, because it's only 7 o'clock Central. It's early for West Coast, but sometimes the conversations go 3 hours. So even a West Coaster could wake up at like 7 and probably still catch it. But if you're somebody who's in the US and wants to go abroad, you want to hear from people who are in different places. You can't work on US time. You know what I mean? Like Europe is away. Asia is still basically awake. The only people who at 8 a.m. Eastern it may not catch is Australia and New Zealand. It is quite late there. And so, but so I've had people from there say like they enjoyed the club and they stay on. And so it's one of the few times where you can catch a lot of people from a lot of different, places in the world, all available to kind of engage with each other. And it's very surprising how similar we're in all these different countries, and our lived experience can be very, very similar because living abroad is really, really similar.
Yeah. That's why I like a lot of mine and yours and so many other people, is it does show like the commonalities that our lives have, while highlighting, the beauty of the places that we're living, the reasons that we've chosen to make this investment in our lives and in our future. I just really like the whole theme of exposure to what you don't know is going to help somebody be able to make that decision for themselves and change the trajectory of their life. And that's kind of part of the work, like, especially with, this show is highlighting the importance of mental health, how living abroad impacts, hopefully positively, and sometimes maybe in a more challenging sense until you learn how to really care for yourself. Because it's not a conversation that we often have. And I really want to lift the shroud, break the stigma of just sitting and talking about taking care of yourself and knowing that it's okay. It's not taboo. It's honestly one of the things that you need to prioritize to be able to fully engulf yourself in the experiences of being an expat, because it's honestly been one of the most life-changing experiences that I've ever undergone. And it's very hard to think of who I am at this point without the experience of living abroad. I wonder, how do you feel?
I can't, like, it's kind of like when people are like, you know, they want me to divorce my blackness and my womanhood. It's like, no,
Never
I
can.
can't. Now I can't divorce. Like even whenever I come back to the US, I will always have this experience of what living abroad, making friends from all these different walks of life. Like
Yeah,
I still like there's people from every walk of life that I still keep in contact with. And as
but
much as I did not enjoy Kuwait, I have two people who are coming and working at my school who I met in Kuwait, you
oh
know, who are
wow.
amazing people. And you know, was just on the phone with one of them like 2 days ago, just like, you excited, you ready, you got your place, you know, like all of those things. And this is forever a part of me. Like,
Yeah,
I feel like when or if I go back to the United States as a leader, I will be able to lead in ways that people who've never been abroad never will be able to. Never,
exactly.
you
Exactly.
know. So it's with me. It's like I'm like it's stuck, like, you know, like I tell certain friends, I'm like, oh, you know, you stuck with me, like we life friends, like you not getting rid of me.
I
Like
know it's literally like a part of your DNA at this point. Such a huge part of your identity. Well, I wanted to ask you I would say one or two last things. When you think about the advancement of mental health in our community as Black people, in our community as, you know, expats, you know, living in all these different places in the world, what would be a hope that you have when it comes to the advancement of mental health?
that more people, one, the one I was talking about with insurance, that insurance becomes back to the point where I was talking about insurance. One advancement I would love to see is that it's standard in health insurance to cover it. One, two, that we talk about it not just from a reactive standpoint, but we talk about it as a proactive approach as well. Because I feel like we wait until there's a diagnosis, there's something large that's happened that, oh no, you've had this traumatic experience, go get therapy, versus getting therapy, you know, ahead of, you know, those type of things.
Right.
And then the last one is that things that we know are good practices that don't have to do with the therapist, that have to do with like self understanding. Some of those things I was talking about is that we really start early to figure out what those are, and we transparently talk to each other about that. Like, I'm getting a facial and a massage on Saturday when I get back. That's that I know that this has been a rough summer. I don't even want to go through what this summer has been.
Yeah.
In like a family way, like lots of illness, death, things like that happening.
Sorry to hear
So
that.
I know that going back, I need to like recharge. And
Yeah.
so like that's part of my recharge process.
I like that. Identifying the small steps to continue to take care of yourself, prioritize your health, especially. And you know, people have to understand that some of the drawbacks of living abroad are that life does go on back in the countries that we come from, and we can be a bit removed from it. And it's really how do we process not being present in ways that we normally would if we were back home. That's a lot to work through, but with a healthy support system, healthy ways of coping, and taking care of yourself, anything is possible. So, what would be the final words that you'd like to leave with the audience?
Kind of what I said earlier is know that you have it in you. Like whatever it is you want to do, you can do it. Go for it. And make sure you just take the time to get the support with whatever it is that you need. Like it's okay to make financial investments into things that are important for you,
Yes.
whatever that may be, whether that's an investment of a massage, that's an investment of someone's services like mine, whether that's an investment in therapy, whether that's an investment in, sometimes the investment is like, oh, I need this day off and it's not going to be paid, I'm going to take it off because I need it. Like it's okay to spend money on you, um, and to care for yourself.
Yeah, that abundance mindset instead of that lack mindset. I
Right.
the reframing of investment is important. We spend money on so many other things to try and escape how we feel, but investing in things are going to help us to be able to show up and take care of ourselves and be the best version of ourselves is the best investment that we could ever make. So I wholly co-sign what you are saying. So can you share with us how we can reach you and connect with you on social media? And I'm definitely going to share all of this in the show notes as well.
So the best way is right now Instagram, which is Worldwide Educator, one word. Other social media platforms is Worldwide Educator, but the 8 part is with the number because Worldwide Educator is too many characters for everybody else. So on Clubhouse is Worldwide Educator with an 8. Twitter is Worldwide Educator with an 8. And then Facebook is Worldwide Educator. I have a Facebook group. I'm on LinkedIn, but the best way, like if you have Instagram is by far the best way. Or set up a consultation. You can find consultation setups on my website, worldwideeducator.org. And if none of those work, you can email me, info@worldwideeducator.org. I'm here to support. I actually, if anybody's like, hey, that interview stuff sounds good, that entry point is too high, I'm doing a mini series. It starts in August. I think it starts in August. Yeah, August, September time. That is only $20, like $25 for each session. And so you can come to those, and it's a 4-part series. So you could do all 4, you could do one. And that's on Eventbrite. Again, everything is Worldwide Educator. So very easy to find me out there in the world. And I'll give you a link to the series so that you can post it in the show notes so that people can join if they're interested.
I will share everything. And I really hope that people that watch this episode and that share this episode really do take you up on the good work that you're doing, because the skills that we have are very transferable. And being able to work with knowledgeable people that, you can trust and that, have evidence to support their success and helping you to move forward is really key. And most importantly, I think it's key for us to help our own if we want to continue to grow our community. So I would like to end by saying thank you so much, Adrienne. This has been such an engaging interview. I've loved listening to everything that you've shared. And for everyone that is watching, I want to say thank you once again for tuning in to the Black Expat Experience. I encourage you to keep taking risks, keep impacting your communities, and most importantly, make sure that you continue to prioritize your mental health. Please share this episode in your communities of influence so that, again, we can help one another thrive and that we can spread the message of the importance of prioritizing your mental health and wellness. And with that, I'm going to say, peace, everyone. Y'all have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.